On today's show, can Team Canada win the gold medal at the U18 World Championships? We'll preview their roster, their lineup, and a lot more on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi, Director of North American Scouting for Dobber Prospects, usually joined by Sebastian Hage, Director of European Scouting and Head Scout for Dobber Prospects. Unfortunately, he's sick. I hope you all wish him well. It's just me for today, but I'll be breaking down Team Canada's roster for the U18 World Championships and breaking down whether or not Team Canada could win a medal or even more win gold at the U18 Worlds. We'll start off with some recent adds and omissions from their rosters. They've added a couple of guys recently, last minute to the roster. The playoffs are going on right now, pretty much across the junior sphere, from the CHL to the USHL. So some prospects who could be at this World Juniors, at this U18 Worlds, won't be available. But some just finished their playoffs, so they've been added to the roster. We'll also talk about some omissions from their roster, so the likes of Michael Hage and those kinds of guys who didn't make the roster, not because they're not in the playoff, not because they're in the playoff, but simply because Team Canada thought they had better options. We'll then look at the roster in detail, look at the forwards, defensemen, give you some scouting reports on all those guys. And then we'll look at the lines and where Canada ends up on the podium if they do. Before we get into any of that, today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe, leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next and what you think of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get things started here with the recent adds and omissions. So on the adds side, the recent additions to the Team Canada roster, we have a big name in Tij Iginla. He's recently showed up in our top 10 at Dobber Prospects. He's, by far a top 10 pick in my opinion, on my personal rankings as well. And he's a great add to this roster. He's going to be winning board battles every chance he gets. He's going to be recycling pucks and putting them on his teammates' sticks consistently. The effort level is insane, but on top of that, he's just a fantastic goal scorer, a great stick handler, a smart playmaker, great vision, really good hockey sense. There's a reason he's in our top 10. This is a very, very good player. And I'm excited to see what ends up happening here with Tij Iginla at this U18 Worlds. I feel like he has a chance to dominate. He's got the physical tools. He's got the intelligence, the awareness, which are a big step up on a lot of this competition. I think Iginla is going to be a good case study in how far translatable skills can carry you at junior levels where they're not as important as the NHL. Another recent add, and there are going to be a couple of draft eligibles here. The next four guys I'm going to mention are also 2024 NHL draft eligibles. We've got Ollie Josephson out of the Red Deer Rebels in the WHL, and he's been looking fairly good this season, decent point totals, but nothing really outstanding. He's a pretty well-rounded prospect. I like the handling skill. He's able to get around players and make plays in transition, and I think that's why he's being added, is that transition element that he brings. But overall, it's going to be very interesting to see him at this World Juniors. It's going to be a better look. I'd be fairly surprised if he cracks the top six. This is a pretty decent top six, and we'll get into that in a second, but Ollie Josephson is very much a decent prospect. Moving on to Maxime Massé, who was added from the QMJHL, another draft eligible. He's been looking fairly good this season. He's the top QMJHLer on a lot of boards. I'm not as sold on the hockey sense and the vision and the habits especially are a bit of an issue. His playmaking skill's fairly good, but he doesn't really scan as much as I'd like him to. Sometimes he misses passing lanes, that kind of stuff. But when he does see a passing lane, he is hitting it, and he's hitting it strong and accurately. So that's kind of what he brings to the game. But he's also a decent physical battler. Battles down low, wins pucks backs, kind of cycles him up to his defenseman, and kind of extends offense's own possessions, which is something I like to see. I just don't see much outside of that from Massé. I don't think the shot is really high end. The playmaking, like I said, really depends on whether he sees the passing lane or not. Then the handling skills about average. But definitely the forechecking ability, the defensive game as well as come in leaps and bounds for Maxime Marseille. So there's a lot to like here. I think he's definitely a great add to this roster, and I think that he's probably going to end up as a third liner on this roster, but we'll see how that works out. The other draft eligible here, the last draft eligible on this list of recent adds to the Team Canada roster is Frankie Morelli. He has a brother, Luca, who also plays in the OHL and is also a draft eligible. Frankie's really interesting. We're talking about a decent-sized defenseman who moves pucks well, who puts shots on net. He does a lot of simple things well. I don't see a lot of complexity in this game. I don't see a player who necessarily has anything stand out in his puck skills and his abilities. But does a lot of things really well. I think that he makes a really good bottom four defenseman for Team Canada at the end of the day. They have a lot of options on defense. They've brought 8 defensemen to this U18 World, so we'll probably be shuffling these around in the pre-games, just kind of seeing how, which pairings work well together. I see Morelli really paired well with a guy like Spencer Gill, who they've also brought in. And the last recent add is Jack Ivankovic, a goaltender of the Mississauga Steelheads. And this is really interesting because both the starter and the backup for Mississauga are on this U18 World's roster. We have Ryerson Leanders, who's already on the roster, and they've added his backup in Jack Ivankovic. So really interesting tandem there, but obviously Carter George is in the mix as well. This is really going to be, I think, the tournament where we get to see whether or not Carter George is better than Ryerson Leanders. I'm on the side of Leanders. Our goalie coach at Dobber Prospects, Colin Hunter, is on the side of Carter George. And we'll be able to see which one of the two gets the starting net here and kind of runs away with it. I think Ivankovic is a clear kind of third string between those three. But it's still interesting to have both a starter and a backup for the same team, the OHL, come to the U18 Worlds. Like that's very, very rare. Now, in terms of omissions, this is where it gets pretty interesting. So Michael Hage, as I mentioned off rip, wasn't included in this roster, and it's not that he refused. It's not even that they got to look at him at the pre-tournaments or the initial roster trainer camp or anything like that. They just didn't ask him to come, which is astounding to me. To not even get an ask for Team Canada for Michael Hage, who's the best player on the Chicago Steel, who has 75 points in 50 games in the USHL, which is a difficult league to put up points in. There's so much to love about Michael Hage's game. For me, he's become a bona fide first rounder. Maybe a 25 to 32 first rounder, but still a bona fide first rounder. So to see him not even get an ask from Team Canada at this U18 Worlds is just out of this world for me. That really doesn't make any sense. In the same vein, I mean, Miguel Marques is not at this U18 Worlds tournament. He just wasn't asked to come as well, and he is the top scorer on a pretty middling team in the Lethbridge Hurricanes. They're not the worst team in the WHL by any means, but they're not particularly good either. So to have him lead that team in scoring and then not make the roster is astounding to me, especially with the names that they have. There's a lot of underage players, a lot of 16, 17-year-olds that are only eligible for the 2025 or even 2026 NHL draft that are at this tournament. But somehow Miguel Marques doesn't cut it. It's really strange to me, especially with the other draft eligibles they added in to this roster. We'll look at that in just a second, but there are some of these guys that I think Miguel Marques is a definite step up on. Marques is another, for me, bona fide first rounder, and there's a player on this roster that for the 2024 NHL draft, I would qualify more as a kind of third, fourth rounder who made the cut, which is really interesting. Another USHLer didn't make the cut. Another Canadian USHLer, John Mustard, who's a borderline first rounder to me. He's in the kind of 35 to 45 range right now. Another really interesting name that didn't make the cut. He's a really speedy, really dynamic rush offense creator. He loves to just skate in and shoot. His curl and drag wrister is fantastic. It's one of the best in this draft, and to leave that much offense off the table for me is really interesting. I mean, John Mustard is a great offensive creator. He brings a lot of speed, a lot of energy, and great goal scoring to the game. So to have him not make the roster, these are pretty interesting. And last but not least, the last submission that I really want to talk about would be Terrence Smith. Terrence Smith is a left-handed defenseman out of the Everett Silvertips, and he has been really, really good this year. I've really liked his game. He's been kind of in the 40 to 50 range for me pretty much all year. Just a really dynamic, really fluid player. A lot of his game flows through his smarts. He's a really intelligent distributor. passes a puck with the right timing into the right spaces, consistently advances the condition of the puck, and makes his teammates' jobs easier when they get the puck by drawing a player in and opening up space. His skating's not as good, that's for sure. Skating hasn't really impressed me in my viewings. And the defensive game is, I'd say, about average, maybe slightly above average because of the smarts, but he is limited by his skating. But overall, I still think he should have made this roster, especially with the defensemen that were brought, especially with bringing 8 defensemen. Um, Three of those defensemen are underage, and Terrence Smith is draft eligible. He's got the frame and the skill to in order to make it work, and especially the smarts. So for me, this is a very interesting omission. But that's our first segment regarding the ads and omissions. We'll get into the roster in just a second and break down the individual players that were brought to this World Juniors, talk you through their game, how they play, what their upside is, how they look this season. We'll get into that in just a second after these messages from our sponsors at Monopoly Go. I've been told I'm a competitive person, and I don't know if that's true or not, but I think everyone has a competitive side, and my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with my friends. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly, but now I can also heist their vaults for riches for myself. And the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with your friends and people around the world in timed tournament to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go right now free on the App Store or Google Play. Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment, we'll be talking about the roster with Team Canada. We'll look at the individual players that were brought to this tournament, how they project, what they look like this season, what they've been doing good, and just overall how interesting this is because there are so many good names at this U18 Worlds roster worth watching. We can start at the very top. I want to start off with a player who's only eligible for the 2026 NHL draft. So 2 drafts from now, he's going to get drafted, and it's Gavin McKenna out of the Medicine Hat Tigers in the WHL. He's been playing pretty much the whole season alongside the likes of Caden Lindstrom earlier on before his injury. Then he played with Andrew Basha, and McKenna has been honestly the best player on Medicine Hat as a 15, 16-year-old. It's been ridiculous to watch. Like his skill level is off the charts. His ability to make plays in transition is amazing. The playmaking especially just stands out massively. He's constantly just threading passes through the right lanes. He does everything right with the puck. His vision is out of this world, and his hands are just amazing. This is a player who has a chock load of skill, but also a lot of mature habits to go along with it. Even though he's a younger player, he's still, he plays the game in ways that advance the puck really well. In the offensive zone, he's not always looking for those dangerous passes. He's not just throwing pucks at the slot willy-nilly. He does it with the right timing when it's required. And when he feels like the situation requires a bit more possession play, he's going to cycle pucks up to his defenseman, recycle pucks, and just keep the offense alive in the offensive zone, which is great to watch. And I think that this is a great ad and kind of an inevitable ad for Team Canada. He's just been way too good. Moving on in terms of forwards, we also have another draft eligible that we haven't talked about yet. Marek Van Acker out of the Brantford Bulldogs in the OHL is going to be at this tournament, and I'm curious to watch him. I had my doubts earlier on in the season, but he's grown on me a bit. I'd say he goes top 50 at the end of the day. I'm more in the kind of 40 to 60 range approximately for him. I'd start considering him in the mid-second round at best. He's a great goal scorer. I love the way he creates off the rush. I love the ability to just cut inside of players and draw them in and, draw sticks to him and then play passes under them or shoot through a screen. Like his rush offense is pretty polished. But he's also really good at kind of taking pucks down low, protecting them and recycling offense again, like just a player who consistently makes it really easy to create in the offensive zone. So I'm really curious to see how he performs at this tournament because he's decent. He's got decent size, 6'1", 170 pounds. He's a left shot player. Pretty interesting. And we also have one of the older players that's going to be eligible for the 2025 NHL draft, and Malcolm Spence out of the Erie Otters in the OHL. He's had a really good season. He's got great size at 6'2", 195 pounds, at still 17 years old. And he's been looking really good for Erie. I mean, the offense obviously comes from the cycling ability. Like this is a player who cycles down low really well, protects pucks really well. and is really good at getting shots inside of pressure. This is not a player who kind of falters when he's leaned on or when he's pushed or when he's tackled. He's able to stay on his feet and take a shot, which is pretty interesting. Maxime Massé also on this roster, who we already mentioned, looking really good, 6'2", 290 pounds, right shot, right winger, out of the Chicoutimi Saguenay, the QMJHL. He's been looking really good, and like I mentioned, defensive game's decent, playmaking's good when he sees those lanes, but really needs to scan a bit more. Another underage player, Roger McQueen. Get ready for the size. 6'5", 190 pounds, and the best name I've heard in quite a while. Roger McQueen, out of the Brandon Wheat Kings in the WHL. Kind of a big. He's played center. He's played wing. Mainly, I see him as a winger, mainly because of the struggling vision at times. But he's really dynamic. He's really flashy. He's really good. I think the skating needs some work, but overall, there's a lot to like in terms of the ability to kind of drag players out of position, to kind of draw attention to him as a big body and just free up a lot of ice for his teammates. But he's also a good forechecker. So there's decent, elements in this game that you can build off of. One of my personal favorites now on this roster as well, Jet Luchenko of the Guelph Storm in the OHL is going to this tournament. He's been the scoring leader for Guelph, has been fantastic all season, just an athletic specimen, and he's an August birthday. He's only a month younger than Malcolm Spence, who's eligible for the 2025 NHL draft, to give you an idea. So he's one of the younger players in the draft, and still just athletically, just so mature, so physically well built, even though he's just 5'11", 183. The skating ability, the physical acumen, the ability to protect pucks, the ability to shield the puck from opponents is just really polished. And I've grown to become a big fan of his playmaking ability. I think the main issue with me with Luchenko was I didn't see as much offensive upside in this game, but that's changed over the last couple of games. Also, we have Ollie Josefson, who we mentioned earlier on, 6 foot, 180 pounds, left shot, center/winger out of the Red Deer Rebels. He's been looking really good this season, so I'm curious to see how he does at this tournament. Ryder Ritchie, another draft eligible out of the Prince Albert Raiders, 6 foot, 170 pound right winger. I have my issues with this game. I don't think he's as polished in terms of intelligence and habits as I would like, but the skill's certainly there. The skill's off the charts. We have another underage player in Porter Martoni, and he's probably one of the best players in the 2025 NHL draft. 6'3", 200 pounds. He's playing for the Mississauga Steelheads in the OHL. So a lot of great Mississauga representation at this tournament. And Martoni's shot off the rush is just ridiculous. He's a great goal scorer, but also has a playmaking touch that you can work with. So decent skill there. I don't think the decision making is all there yet, but he can get there. Carson Wetch is the player I mentioned earlier as a player who I think is probably going to go in the third and fourth round in this draft, but got picked over Miguel Marques. Very curious decision for me. I'll see how that works out. But yeah, definitely a bottom sixer in this tournament. Be very surprised if he plays in the top six. Pretty straightforward, reliable, dump and chase, kind of recycle pucks type of forward. Doesn't have that much skill, but he's a big body who recovers pucks. Team Canada loves those in their bottom six. Tij Iginla, of course. We also have another underage player, and Caleb Dinoyer, out of the Moncton Wildcats in the QMJHL, and he's been looking amazing this season. He looks like the turnaround for Quebec hockey. They haven't had a lot of top 10, top 15 talent in recent years. Dinoyer could change that for the 2025 NHL draft. We also have Liam Greentree, who's 11th on our board at Dobber Prospects, been looking really good. Big winger out of the Windsor Spitfires, been playing really good this season. Great intelligence. Cole Baudouin out of the Barrie Colts. This is another player I think is probably going to be playing in the bottom six for Team Canada. Big body, 6'2", 200 pounds, and probably the best player at turning 50-50 battles into lengthy possession. So I'm really excited about his game at this tournament. And now we get into the defensemen. And we've got a bunch of them. We'll start with the right-handed defenseman, Harrison Brunick out of the Kamloops Blazers, Henry Muse out of the Ottawa 67s. We also have Spencer Gill out of the Rimouski Oceanic out of the QMJHL, and Charlie Ellick out of the Brandon Wheat Kings. You're going to notice a trend here. a decent amount of size on this right side, especially with Gil, Elik, and Brunick, all 6'3". Elik is 200 pounds. These are three big boys who can play well with the puck, especially Brunick. I've been really impressed with his stick handling ability. And on the left side, we have three underage players. Matthew Schaefer, 6'1", 162 pounds, eligible for the 2025 NHL draft, playing with the Erie Otters. He's been playing really well, a good two-way defenseman. We also have Reese Hamilton and Kashawn Aitchison. Kashawn Aitchison is really interesting to me. So he's he's going to be one of the older players in the 2025 draft. Also with the Barrie Colts. I've been impressed with this game physically. He's 6'1", 190 pounds. Plays some decent defensive minutes. But yeah, for me, the main standout on the left side is Frankie Morelli, who was just added in. I think he's going to end up being on the third pair, especially with how good Matthew Schaefer has been this year. I think he ends up on the second pair. You'll probably have a top pair of two right-handed defensemen. For me, it's probably going to be Muse and Elik. But we'll get into the lineups in just a second, and we'll also get into where Canada ends up on the podium. We'll get into that in just a second, right after these messages from our sponsors at Indeed. When you're drafting for your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could handpick the best stars for your business team? If you're building your talent roster, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. You don't need to spend hours on multiple job sites looking for the right candidates who have the right qualifications and personal qualities with the right skills. You can do it all through Indeed, really simply. It helps you find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like matching, assessments, and virtual interviews. If you hate waiting, Indeed's US data shows that over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resume matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. The best thing about Indeed is Indeed matching. Candidates who invite to apply through Instant Match are 3 times more likely to apply to your job than candidates who only see it in search, according to US Indeed data. With Indeed matching, as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description. It's as easy as that. So Indeed knows that when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. And that's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. So visit Indeed.com/locked-on to start hiring now. That's Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone, but if you need to hire, you need Indeed. Alrighty, so to close things off, we'll predict Team Canada's lineup for the 2024 U18 World Championships. We'll look at how the lines end up potentially, and also look at where they end up on the podium. This is a pretty strong roster looking at it right now. I think the defense might be an issue, especially with that much young talent on the team and a kind of overload on the right side. We'll see how that works out. But to start with the forwards, I think the first line is pretty clear for me. It's going to be Gavin McKenna, Tij Iginla, and Liam Greentree. Now, Iginla and Greentree have played center on and off this year. Whether or not you place Iginla at center or Greentree at center, either way, you've got a decent first line there, chock full of high-end talent and translatable tools. These are 3 very, very, very intelligent players who think at the same pace, who play at the same pace. Greentree is definitely a bit slower in terms of skating ability, but his smarts get him in the right spots. And Iginla is really good at doing the hard work, skating the fastest on his line, recycling pucks, playing on his teammates' sticks. And I think Greentree is going to have just a blast next to Iginla at this tournament if they do end up playing together. And Gavin McKenna right there is just your connecting force, your playmaking driver, the guy who's going to carry pucks across lines and make things really easy for Iginla and Greentree once they get in the offensive zone. Because again, McKenna's just so incredibly smart, incredibly skilled. It's going to be really exciting to see him. I think of the players here, of the underage players here, I think McKenna's the most likely to end up on a top line. Second to that would be Porter Martone, and Martone's actually on the second line. The second line for me would be Marek Van Acker, Jet Luchenko, and Porter Martone. So I think Van Acker's ability to cut across and transition combines really well with Luchenko's ability to kind of jumpstart rushes with really good defensive plays and great breakout passing. So that's going to give Van Acker a lot of touches in transition. And once Van Acker cuts to the middle, I think Porter Martone just kind of gliding into the offensive zone as a third option and just rifling shots off the rush. That's going to be your rush offense line for sure, but also a line that can do some decent work. I think it can offset Martone's defensive lackings with Luchenko's high-end defensive awareness. And Van Acker's well-rounded and just gels really well on that line. But Van Acker, I think, could play on all four lines. I think that's a fair likelihood. The third line for me for Team Canada would be Maxime Massé, Cole Baudouin, and Roger McQueen. And that's your big boy line. That's your checking line. Baudouin working the cycle, chasing dump-ins, recycling pucks, putting them on the sticks of guys like Massé and McQueen, playing low to high to the defenseman. If you have a defenseman, let's say like Charlie Elick, more or less matched with that forward line, or Spencer Gill as well. One of these big bodies who love to take shots, booming shots from the point. Great work if you can get that combination on the ice, because Massé, Baudouin, and McQueen are going to be doing a lot of energy work on that line and just cycling pucks up. So you need a defenseman up there who's able to rifle the puck on net. And all three of Massé, Baudouin, and McQueen can work the net front as well. So once the puck is cycled, they're going to drive the net. They're going to get in the goalie's face. They're going to screen him, and shots are going to start going in. That's for sure. And the fourth line for me would be Carson Wetch, Ollie Josefson, and Jordan Spence. That leaves Caleb Desnoyers as a 13th forward. Now I have. If you're asking me, I would rather have Desnoyers in the top 12, but given what Team Canada usually goes with, I'm almost sure that Carson Wetch is going to be playing on their fourth line. And then you add Jordan Spence and Ollie Josefson's skill to that, and all of a sudden you've got a great combination of skills that can do a bit of everything, a kind of versatile fourth line. On defense, I think the first pair is going to be Henry Muse and Charlie Elick. Muse has high-end transition skill. He's got high-end skill overall. I like the passing. I like the shot. I like the hands. And that combines really well with Charlie Elick's pure defensive ability. This is just your big physical right-handed defenseman, but Elick he's got some decent kind of sneaky good two-way ability. He's able to make passes out of his zone fairly well. He's able to join rushes late. He takes booming shots from the point. And has decent hands when he wants to. He's not the type of player who really thinks deke, but he's a player who can do it when the situation arises. So for me, that's the first pair. Your second pair would be Matthew Schaefer, the underage defenseman. One of the underage left-handed defensemen, with Harrison Bruinick on the second pair. I think that's a decent pair of skilled two-way defensemen who can play in any scenario. You can put them in a defensive zone face-off, they'll do a decent job. You can put them on an offensive zone face-off, and they'll kind of alternate with forwards, get down the boards, make plays down low, that kind of stuff. So two really good defensemen who can do a bit of everything. And your third pair is a bit more of a specialist pair for me. It's going to be Frankie Morelli and Spencer Gill. Gill is a big physical defenseman as well. He's mainly a defensive defenseman, but I've seen some decent improvements in his breakout skill. And Morelli's a bit of the same, where he's decent defensively, not really flashy or anything outstanding offensively, but does the little things really well. So that's your pair that you need. In the defensive zone face-off, you've got a minute or two to kill. Those are the guys you put out. And that leaves Kashawn Aitchison and Reese Hamilton, the two other underage defensemen at this tournament, as the seventh and eighth defensemen. But we'll see how that works out. I'd be curious to see if Aitchison and Hamilton get a look or two, especially against weaker teams, just to see what they can do. And maybe they steal a roster spot. We'll see. And lastly, in goal, I think that it's going to be Ryerson Leanders as the starting goaltender and Carter George as a backup. But we'll see how that works out. George and Leanders are back-to-back in our rankings of double prospects, and there's a decent argument for either one of them. In terms of the podium, now this is a really good roster up front, but I think the defense might struggle a bit, especially against those higher-end teams, the USAs, the Swedens, even Czechia's been looking really good recently, and Finland, of course. So I think that they might not win the gold medal. I think that at best, I see Canada as a silver medal winner. More likely as a bronze medal winner. They might lose a semis against an important matchup team like Sweden or Finland or even USA, which would put them in the bronze medal game, but I don't think they're losing the bronze medal game. For me, for certain, Team Canada is either bronze or silver. If they pull off gold, it would be an upset. It would be a surprise. But they're looking really good, especially up front, with the amount of talent and skill that they have. If they lean into the offensive side, great. It's just that add of Carson Wetch that's making me think, what direction are they trying to go with this roster? Because if they try to play mature defensive hockey at a tournament as chaotic and high paced as the U18 Worlds, it's not going to work. But if Carson Wetch ends up being pushed out of the lineup by a guy like Caleb Desnoyers, and they lean into the offense really truly, I think that there's a decent chance that we see Team Canada go to gold. but it really depends on what style they end up playing. But that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next and what you thought of the episode and what you think Team Canada is going to be able to pull off at this U18 Worlds. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to leave us a rate and review. It helps the channel out a lot. And make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our next shows as we continue our prospect coverage for April and May and lean into the U18 Worlds coverage as the tournament ramps up. This has been Hadi, Director of North American Scouting for Dalbert Prospects, usually joined by Sebastian Hage. Again, unfortunately, he's sick. We'll see him next time, and we'll see you next time.